Say something about the way in which our language operates. For technology, we have good language. For reason and logic, we have good language. When it comes to feeling, we have a very small vocabulary. The poets have given us a larger vocabulary, but in the world, we haven't developed the vocabulary of the heart. And whenever there is consciousness that doesn't have vocabulary, it seems to shrink away into avidya, not knowing. And so it's necessary to create more heart language. What is also necessary is to create more, when we speak of faith and the higher levels and so on, we need language for intuition. And our intuition is mute. At this point, we don't have any words for intuition. If somebody says something to you, but I intuit, when I go to medicine people, shamans and so on and so forth, and you ask them the question, tell me, how do you know? How could they say how they know? They were there, they experienced, they knew. And so it is also with people who say, I've been born again, and you ask them, how do you know? How do you know? Because we haven't developed the language, and I think our problem for education is to create more language for heart and more language for soul. I would like to say, Your Holiness, that the God you don't believe in, I don't believe in either.
Yes.
You look more serious now.
No.
If I may address this to His Holiness, when we were in Dharamsala, the question was, how can the Tibetan communities survive in a diaspora? When I look around, we are all in a diaspora today. The First Nations have had to go and be in a diaspora in reservations. The people who have come here from abroad are in a diaspora too. There's hardly anybody who is not in a diaspora, which meant that the question of how do we build an intentional society in a time when the neighborhoods have been killed by the automobile. You don't go shopping in your immediate neighborhood. You don't sit on the porch anymore and talk to people. Hardly anybody has come to our house knocking on the door saying, hey, could I borrow a cup of sugar from you? And when you start asking how this works out, the question comes, how do we build this community? Because ever since the time of the Renaissance, we have been, how would I say, exalting the individual and not the community, which meant that with the social mobility that we have, grandparents and grandchildren, look at my grandchildren, we are not living in the same community anymore, which means that all that we have is our parents, and with our parents, we are enemies. With our grandparents, we have a common ally. And when grandparents pass on meaningful things to grandchildren, then values, family values, get passed on. And I look back at the kibbutz movement, which was such a remarkable way of trying to create intentional community. Conscious, intentional community. And most of the time, those of you who can still remember the days in Haight-Ashbury and the communes that people had, and where are they today? Because what happens is that most of the time, the people who are embracing a new spiritual path they're just a one-generation phenomenon. Show me the children and the grandchildren of people who have embraced one of the new religions, if you will. So we are in trouble. And I think I wish I could say here in this place or in that place we have a model community. All that we can do is share with each other right now the little bit of know-how that we have of collaboration. When I go back to the time I lived in Winnipeg, and I walked around McGregor Avenue, and I would see there that the Ukrainians had their self-help organization, the Polish people had their self-help organization, and so there was always the Jewish people had their self-help organization, and so there was a coherence.